Odyssey, Book 8. Dawn spread her rose light over the sky, and Alcinous awoke in all his sacred might, as did Zeus-born Odysseus, sacker of cities. Alcinous led the way to the Phaeacian assembly, which was built near the harbor. The Phaeacians filed in, and sat on the polished stones close by each other, and Pallas Athena, disguised as Alcinous's herald, went through the city to lay the groundwork for Odysseus's trip home, going up to each man and saying to him, "Gather round, Phaeacian leaders and counselors, and go to the assembly to learn of the stranger who has just arrived at Alcinous's palace, driven over the sea, a man like a god." This got their attention, and the seats in the assembly filled up quickly with men who marveled at the sight of Laertes' son, for Athena poured on his shoulders and head a shimmering grace, and made him taller and more heavily muscled, so that he would be welcomed by the Phaeacians as a man to respect, and so he would be able to accomplish the feats the Phaeacians would use to test his mettle. When the men were all gathered, Alcinous spoke. "Hear me, Phaeacian lords and counselors, so I may speak what is in my heart. This stranger has come to my house in his wanderings. I don't know who he is, or if he has come from the east or the west. He asks for passage home, and asks us to set a firm time for departure. Let us speed him on his way, as we have always done. No one has ever come to my house and languished here long for lack of transport. Haul a black ship, then, onto the bright salt water for her maiden voyage, and pack 52 of the best young sailors in all the land. When you have lashed the oars well at the benches, disembark and hurry to my house. We have a feast to prepare, and I will provide well for all. Those are my orders for the younger men. But you others, all the sceptred kings, come to my palace and help me entertain the stranger in the hall. Let no one refuse, and summon the godlike singer of tales, Demodocus, for the god has given him beyond all others song that delights, however his heart urges him to sing." So saying, he led the way, followed by the sceptred kings. A herald went for the godlike singer, and 52 chosen young sailors went, as he ordered, down to the shore of the barren sea. There they hauled a ship out onto the water. They set up mast and sail in that swift black ship, fit the oars into the leather thole straps, all in due order, and then unfurled the white sails. They moored the ship where her sails would catch the evening breeze, and then went their way to the great palace of wise Alcinous. The porticos, courtyards, and rooms were filled with crowds of men, both young and old. Alcinous sacrificed for them 12 sheep, 8 white-tusked boars, and 2 shambling oxen, which they flayed and dressed for the feast. Then the herald came up, leading Demodocus. The muse loved this man, but gave him good and evil both, sniffing out the light of his eyes as she opened his heart to sweet song. Pontonous, the herald, had the bard sit among the banqueters on a silver-studded chair propped against a column, and he hung the clear-toned lyre on a peg above Demodocus's head, and showed him how to reach it with his hands. He set up a table and basket beside the bard, and a cup of wine ready at hand. They all reached out to the feast before them, and when they had satisfied their appetites, the muse moved the bard to sing of heroes. The piece that he sang was already famed throughout the world, the quarrel Odysseus once had with Achilles, going head-to-head at a feast of the gods with violent words. And Agamemnon the warlord rejoiced that these two, the best of the Greeks, were at each other's throats. For long ago, when he crossed the stone threshold in sacred Pytho to consult the oracle, Apollo had prophesied that this would happen. That was in the days when the great tide of woe was rolling in upon Trojans and Greeks alike through the will of great Zeus. This was the song the renowned bard sang. But Odysseus pulled his great purple cloak over his head and hid his handsome face. He was ashamed to let the Phaeacians see his tears falling down. Whenever the singer paused, Odysseus would wipe away his tears, pick up his great cup, and pour libations to the gods. But when the singer started again, urged on by the Phaeacian lords who delighted in his words, Odysseus would cover his head again and moan. He managed to conceal his tears from everyone except Alcinous, who sat at his elbow and could not help but hear the heavy sighs. Alcinous acted quickly and said to his guests, "Hear me, Phaeacian nobles and lords, we have had enough of feasting now. We should go outdoors and for some contests now, all the athletic events, so that this stranger can tell his friend back home how good we are in boxing, wrestling, jumping, and foot races." And with that he led them outdoors. The herald hung the clear-toned lyre on its peg and led Demodocus by the hand out of the hall and along the road. The nobles had gone down to see the games. They made their way to the assembly grounds, and huge crowds trailed along, thousands past counting. Then up rose the young heroes. Up rose Acroneus, and Ochialus, and Elatrius, Nautius, Primeus, Anchialus, and Eretmius, Pontius, Prorius, Thoon, and Anabessanius, Amphialus, Polonius' son, and Tecton's grandson, and Euryalus, a match for the war god, the son of Naubolus. He was the handsomest of the Phaeacians, after peerless Laodamas. And up rose the three sons of Alcinous, Laodamas, Halius, and godlike Clytonius. The first contest was a foot race. The course stretched out before them from the starting post, and they were off, raising dust from the plain as they sped along. No one could keep up with Clytonius, who extended his lead to the length of a furrow a mule team plows. That's how far ahead he was when he reached the crowd, leaving the rest of the field far behind. Wrestling was next, and in this painful sport Euryalus outdid the other young princes. The best jumper proved to be Amphialus. Elatrius took the discus throw, and Laodamas, Alcinous' son, outboxed all comers. Everyone had enjoyed the games, and then Alcinous' son Laodamas said to his friends, "Come on now, we should ask the stranger whether he is skilled in any sport. His build is impressive enough, his thighs and calves, his arms and stout neck. This man is strong. He's still got what it takes, but he has been broken by many hardships. Nothing's worse than the sea to get a man out of shape, no matter how strong he is." And Euryalus answered him, "Well spoken, Laodamas. Go ahead and challenge him yourself in public." When Laodamas heard this, he strode out front and center and spoke to Odysseus. "You should come forward, too, as our guest, and try your hand at one of the sports, if you are skilled in any. I'm sure you are, for there is no greater glory a man can win in life than the glory he wins with his hands and feet. So shrug off your cares and give it a try. It won't delay your journey. Your ship is already launched and the crew is ready." Odysseus, always thinking, answered him this way, "Laodamas, why do you provoke me like this? I have more serious things on my mind than track and field. I've had my share of suffering and paid my dues. Now I sit in the middle of your assembly, longing to return home, a suppliant before your king and all the people." Then Euryalus taunted him to his face. "You know, stranger, I've seen a lot of sportsmen, and you don't look like one to me at all. You look more like the captain of a merchant ship, plying the seas with a crew of hired hands and keeping a sharp eye on his cargo, greedy for profit. No, you're no athlete." Odysseus stared the man down and said, "That's an ugly thing to say, stranger, and it makes you look like a reckless fool. The sad truth is that the gods don't give anyone all their gifts, whether it's looks, intelligence, or eloquence. One man might not have good looks, but the gods crown his words with beauty, and men look at him with delight. He speaks with unfaltering grace and sweet modesty, and stands out in the crowd. When he walks through town, men look upon him as a god. Another man might look like an immortal, but his words are not crowned with beauty. That's how it is with you. Your looks are outstanding, not even a god could improve them, but your mind is crippled. And now you've got my blood pumping with your rude remarks. I'm no novice in sports, as you suggest. No, I was one of the best when I could trust my youth and my hands. Now I'm slowed down by my aches and pains and the suffering I've had in war and at sea. Even so, even with all I've been through, I'll give your games a try. Your words cut deep, and now you've got me going." He jumped up, cloak still on, and grabbed a discus larger than the others, thicker and much heavier than the one the Phaeacians used for competition. Winding up, he let it fly, and the stone launched with incredible force from his hand, hummed as it flew. The Phaeacians ducked as the discus zoomed overhead and finally landed far beyond the other marks. Pallas Athena, who looked like a man now, marked the spot where it came down, and she called out to him, "Even a blind man could find your mark, stranger, for it's not all mixed up with the others, but way out front. You can be confident no Phaeacian will come close to this throw." Odysseus cheered up at this, glad to see a loyal supporter out on the field. In a lighter mood now, he spoke to the Phaeacians. "Match that if you can, boys. In a minute I'll get another one just as far or farther." And if anyone else has the urge to try me, step right up. I'm angry now. I don't care if it's boxing, wrestling, or even running. Come one, come all, except Laodamas, who is my host. Only a fool would challenge the man who gives him hospitality in a distant land. He would only wind up hurting himself. But I wouldn't turn down anyone else, or take any of you lightly. I only want to see what you're made of, and to test myself. I'm not weak in any athletic event, and I really know how to handle a bow. I'm always the first to hit my man in the enemy lines, no matter how many archers are standing before me and getting off shots. Only Philoctetes, of all the Greeks, outshot me at Troy. No one else came close, nor could any man now alive on this earth. I do not compare myself to the men of old, to Heracles or Oechalian Eurytus, who tried to shoot the immortal gods. Eurytus died young, killed by Apollo, who was angry that he had challenged him to a contest with the bow. As for the spear, I can throw it farther than you can shoot an arrow. It's only in running that I fear some Phaeacian may beat me to the line. I've taken a pounding out in the waves and didn't come here aboard a well-stocked ship, so my legs are still shaky. He spoke, and they were all stunned to silence. Only Alcinous was able to answer. Your words, stranger, are not ungracious. You want only to demonstrate your prowess, angry that this man stood up in the games and taunted you in a way no one ever would, who knew in his heart how to speak fitly. But now listen to my words, so that one day, as you sit feasting with your wife and children, you may tell another hero what you remember of the Phaeacian skill in the feast that Odysseus established as ours in our forefathers' days. For we are not flawless boxers or wrestlers, but we are swift of foot, and the best sailors, and we love feasts and the lyre and dancing, fresh clothes, warm baths, and soft beds. Up now, let the best dancers in Phaeacia dance, so that the stranger can tell his friends back home how superior we are in seamanship, in fleetness of foot, in dancing, and in song. Someone go get Demodocus his lyre, which is lying somewhere in the palace halls. Thus godlike Alcinous and the herald left to get the hollow lyre from the king's palace. Then uprose the officials, 9 in all, who were in charge of the games. They marked out a wide dancing ring and made the ground level. The herald returned with the lyre, and Demodocus moved to the middle of the dancing ring, surrounded by boys in the bloom of youth, accomplished dancers all. Their feet struck the floor of the sacred ring, and as Odysseus watched, he marveled at how their feet flashed in the air. Then Demodocus swept the strings of his lyre and began his song. He sang of the passion between Ares and gold-crowned Aphrodite, how they first made love in Hephaestus' house, sneaking around, and how the war god Ares showered her with gifts and shamed the bed of her husband Hephaestus. But it wasn't long before Hephaestus found out. Helios told him that he had seen them lying together in love. When Hephaestus heard this heart-wrenching news, he went to his forge, brooding on his wrongs, and set the great anvil up on its block, and hammered out a set of unbreakable bonds, bonds that wouldn't loosen, bonds meant to stay put. When he had wrought this snare, furious with Ares, he went to his bedroom and spread the bonds all around the bedposts, and hung many also from the high roof beams, as fine as cobwebs, so fine not even the gods could see them. When he had spread this cunning snare all around the bed, he pretended to leave on a trip to Lemnos, his favorite city. Ares wasn't blind, and when he saw Hephaestus on his way out, he headed for the house of the glorious smith, itching to make love to the Cytherean goddess. She had been visiting her father Zeus, and was just sitting down when Ares came in, took her hand, and said, "Let's go to bed, my love, and lie down together. Hephaestus has left town, off to Lemnos, no doubt, to visit the barbarous Sintians." This suggestion appealed to the goddess, and they climbed into bed. They were settling in when the chains Hephaestus had cunningly wrought fell all around them. They couldn't move an inch, couldn't lift a finger, and by the time it sank in that there was no escape, there was Hephaestus, gimpy-legged and glorious, coming in the door. He had turned back on his way to Lemnos as soon as Helios, his spy, gave him the word. He stood in the doorway, seething with anger, and with an ear-splitting yell called to the gods, "Father Zeus and all you blessed gods eternal, come see something that is as ridiculous as it is unbearable. How Aphrodite, daughter of Zeus, scorns me for being lame, and loves that marauder Ares instead, because he is handsome and well-knit, whereas I was born misshapen, which is no one's fault but my parents, who should have never begotten me. Come take a look at how these two have climbed into my bed to make love and lie in each other's arms. It kills me to see it, but I don't think they will want to lie like this much longer, no matter how loving they are. No, they won't want to sleep together for long, but they're staying put in my little snare until her father returns all of the gifts I gave him to marry this bitch-faced girl, his beautiful, yes, but faithless daughter. Thus Hephaestus and the gods gathered at his bronze threshold. Poseidon came, the god of earthquake, and Hermes, the guide, and the archer Apollo. The goddesses all stayed home out of modesty. But the gods stood in the doorway and laughed uncontrollably when they saw Hephaestus's cunning and craft. One of them would look at another and snicker, "Crime doesn't pay." The slow catches the swift. Slow as he is, old Gimpy caught Ares, the fastest god on Olympus. Ares has to pay the fine for adultery. That was the general drift of their jibes, and then Apollo turned to Hermes and said, "Tell me, Hermes, would you be willing to be pinched in chains if it meant you could lie side by side with golden Aphrodite?" And the quicksilver messenger shot back, "I tell you what, Apollo, tie me up with 3 times as many unbreakable chains and get all the gods and goddesses, too, to come here and look, if it means I can sleep side by side with golden Aphrodite." The gods roared with laughter, except Poseidon, who did not think it was funny. He kept pleading that Ares should be released, and his words winged their way to Hephaestus. "Let him go, and I will ensure he will pay you fair compensation before all the gods." And the renowned god, lame in both legs, "Do not ask me to do this, Poseidon. Worthless is the surety assured for the worthless. How could I ever hold you to your promise if Ares slipped out of the bonds and the debt?" Poseidon, the earth-shaker, did not back off. "Hephaestus, if Ares gets free and disappears without paying the debt, I will pay it myself." And the renowned god, lame in both legs, "I cannot refuse you. It wouldn't be right." And with that, the strong smith undid the bonds, and the two of them, free at last from their crimp, shot out of there, Ares to Thrace, and Aphrodite, who loves laughter and smiles, to Paphos on Cyprus, and her precinct there with its smoking altar. There the Graces bathed her and rubbed her with ambrosial oil that glistens on the skin of the immortal gods, and then they dressed her in beautiful clothes, a wonder to see. This was the song the renowned bard sang, and Odysseus was glad as he listened, as were the Phaeacians, men who are famed for their long-oared ships. Then Alcinous had Helios and Laodamas dance alone, for no one could match them. They picked up a beautiful iridescent ball, the work of Polybus. One of them would lean backward and toss it high toward the shadowy clouds, and the other would leap and catch it and shoot it back up before his feet ever touched ground again. When they had tried their skill with upward throws, they started to dance on the bounteous earth, tossing the ball constantly back and forth. The others beat time as they stood on the field, and thunderous applause rose from the crowd. Then Odysseus said to Alcinous, "Lord Alcinous, you said that your dancers are the best in the world, and your words have proved true. I am in awe before them." So he spoke, and the sacred king was glad. He turned to his sea-loving people and said, "Hear me, Phaeacian lords and counselors. Our guest seems, in my eyes, to be a man of the highest discernment. Come then, let us give him a gift that befits a guest. 12 honored kings are lords in Phaeacia, and I myself am the 13th king. Let each of you 12 bring me, here now, a fresh cloak and tunic and a bar of fine gold. Let us get these all together at once, so that our guest may have these gifts in hand and be glad at heart when he goes to supper. And let Euryalus apologize and give him a gift, for what he said to our guest was in no way proper." The lords all approved of what Alcinous said, and each sent a herald to fetch the gifts. Then Euryalus in turn answered Alcinous, "Lord Alcinous, renowned above all men, I will indeed apologize to our guest as you bid, and I will give him this sword, all bronze, and with a silver hilt. It comes with a scabbard of newly sawn ivory, and will be worth much to him." And he put the silver-studded sword into Odysseus's hands and said to him, "Revered stranger and guest, if any word has been spoken harshly, may the winds snatch it away, and may the gods grant that you see your wife and come to your homeland, for you have suffered long apart from your people." And Odysseus, whose thoughts were many, And you, my friend, be well, and may the gods grant you happiness, and may you never miss this sword you have given me to make amends." He spoke and slung the silver-studded sword around one shoulder. The sun went down, and the gifts were ready to be presented. The heralds brought them into the palace, and Alcinous's sons set them down before their mother. They were beautiful gifts. Alcinous, the sacred king, led the way, and the lords entered and sat on their thrones. Then Alcinous, in his might, addressed Arete. "Bring out the finest chest you have, my wife, and place in it a newly washed cloak and tunic, and heat water for our guest in a bronze cauldron, so that when he has bathed and seen the gifts the Phaeacians have brought, all neatly stowed, he will enjoy the feast and the words of the song. And I will give him this beautiful cup, pure gold, to remember me by all of his days, as he pours wine to Zeus and to the other gods." He spoke, and Arete signaled her women to set a cauldron on the fire instantly. They filled the cauldron with water for a bath, set kindling beneath it, and lit the fire. The flames licked the belly of the cauldron, and the water grew warm. Arete, meanwhile, brought out a handsome chest for the stranger, and placed within it the beautiful gifts, the clothes and the gold which the nobles gave. And she herself placed in it a cloak and beautiful tunic. And she said to Odysseus, "There is the lid. Tie it down with a knot as a precaution against someone robbing you on your way back, when you are lying asleep on your journey home in the swift black ship." When Odysseus, who had borne much, heard this, he tied the lid down with a cunning knot he had learned from Circe. Then the housekeeper came to tell him it was time to go and bathe. The warm bath was a welcome sight to Odysseus. He had not been cared for like this since leaving Calypso, who had treated him as if he were a god. When the women had bathed him, rubbed him with oil, and clothed him in a beautiful tunic and cloak, Odysseus strode from the bath and was on his way to join the men drinking wine. Nausicaa, beautiful as only gods could make her, stood by the doorpost of the great hall. Her eyes went wide when she saw Odysseus, and her words beat their way to him on wings. "Farewell, stranger, and remember me in your own native land. I saved your life." And Odysseus, whose thoughts ran deep, "Nausicaa, daughter of great Alcinous, so may Zeus, Hera's thundering lord, grant that I see my homeland again. There I will pray to you as to a god all of my days. I owe you my life." And he set his seat next to Lord Alcinous. They were serving food and mixing the wine, when the herald came up, leading the bard, honored Demodocus, and seated him on a chair, propped against a tall pillar in the middle of the hall. Odysseus, with great presence of mind, cut off part of a huge chine of roast pork, glistening with fat, and said to the herald, "Herald, take this cut of meat to Demodocus for him to eat, and I will greet him despite my grief. Bards are revered by all men upon earth, for the muse loves them well, and has taught them the song ways." The herald brought the cut of meat to Demodocus and placed it in his hands, much to the bard's delight. Then everyone reached out to the feast before them, and when they had eaten and drunk to their heart's content, Odysseus spoke to Demodocus. "I don't know whether it was the muse who taught you or Apollo himself, but I praise you to the skies, Demodocus, when you sing about the fate of the Greeks who fought at Troy. You have it right, all that they did and suffered, all they endured. It's as if you had been there yourself, or heard a first-hand account. But now, switch to the building of the wooden horse, which Hephaestus made with Athena's help. The horse which Odysseus led up to Troy as a trap, filled with men who would destroy great Ilion. If you tell me this story just as it happens, I will tell the whole story that some god must have opened his heart and given to you the divine gift of song." So he spoke, and the bard, moved by the god, began to sing. He made them see it happen, how the Greeks set fire to their huts on the beach and were sailing away, while Odysseus and the picked men with him sat in the horse which the Trojans had dragged into their city. There the horse stood, and the Trojans sat around it and could not decide what they should do. There were 3 ways of thinking: hack open the timbers with pitiless bronze and throw it from the heights to the rocks below, or let it stand as an offering to appease the gods. The last was what would happen, for it was fated that the city would perish once it enclosed the great wooden horse, in which now sat the Greek heroes who would spill Troy's blood. The song went on. The Greeks poured out of their hollow ambush and sacked the city. He sang how one hero here and another there ravaged tall Troy, but how Odysseus went like the war god himself with Menelaus to the house of Deiphobus, and there, he said, Odysseus fought his most daring battle, and won with the help of Pallas Athena. This was his song, and Odysseus wept. Tears welled up in his eyes and flowed down his cheeks. A woman wails as she throws herself upon her husband's body. He has fallen in battle before the town walls, fighting to the last to defend his city and protect his children. As she sees him dying and gasping for breath, she clings to him and shrieks, while behind her soldiers prod their spears into her shoulders and back, and as they lead her away into slavery, her tear-drenched face is a mask of pain. So too Odysseus, pitiful in his grief. He managed to conceal his tears from everyone except Alcinous, who sat at his elbow, and could not help but hear his heavy sighs. Alcinous acted quickly, and said to his guests, "Hear me, Phaeacian counselors and lords. Demodocus should stop playing his lyre. His song is not pleasing to everyone here. Ever since dinner began and the divine bard rose up to sing, our guest has not ceased from lamentation. He is overcome with grief. Let the lyre stop. It is better if we all host and guest alike can enjoy the feast. All that we are doing on behalf of the revered stranger, providing him with passage home and gifts of friendship. A stranger and suppliant is as dear as a brother to anyone with even an ounce of good sense. So there's no need, stranger, for you to withhold what I am about to ask for. No need to be crafty or think of gain. Better to speak the plain truth. Tell me your name, the one you were known by to your father and mother and your people back home. No one is nameless, rich man or poor. Parents give names to all their children when they are born. And tell me your country, your city, and your land, so that our ships may take you there, finding their way by their wits. For Phaeacian ships do not have pilots, nor steering oars, as other ships have. They know on their own their passengers' thoughts, and know all the cities and rich fields in the world. And they cross the great gulfs with the greatest speed, hidden in mist and fog, with never a fear of damage or shipwreck. But I remember hearing my father, Nausithous, say how Poseidon was angry with us because we always give safe passage to men. He said that one day Poseidon would smite a Phaeacian ship as it sailed back home over the misty sea, and would encircle our city with a mountain. The old man used to say that, and either the god will bring it to pass or not, as suits his pleasure. But tell me this, and tell me the truth. Where have you wandered? To what lands? Tell me about the people and cities you saw. Which ones are cruel and without right and wrong? Which ones are God-fearing and kind to strangers? And tell me why you weep and grieve at heart when you hear the fate of the Greeks and Trojans. This was the gods' doing. They spun that fate so that in later times it would turn into song. Did some kinsman of yours die at Troy, a good loyal man, your daughter's husband, or your wife's father, someone near and dear, or perhaps even a relative by blood? Or was it a comrade, tried and true? A friend like that is no less than a brother.